So I guess we can call this meeting of the Hindley Homes and Royal Building Committee to order at 6 o'clock. First order of business is to approve the minutes from the meeting on July 13th. I guess
So
that's right.
it is July 14th. I had it wrong. I had put out the amended minutes this morning. For whatever reason, I thought it was on the 13th, but it is on July 14th. The amended minutes, which you received, also have Travis's name spelled correctly. So thanks. Sorry, Travis. So if we could please, if someone can make a motion to approve those, that'd be great.
Before we do that, though, just quickly,
Yes.
is that the meeting? I want to make sure I'm getting my schedules right. We had a meeting since the 14th, didn't we?
We had the tour
presentation. We had the tour, right? And
but we had a tour, but we didn't really call it to order.
Okay. All right.
We had it on camera, but we did not call it to order. We did not.
Right.
There was no discussion.
Sarah, we should probably.
And we had the design presentation by KG&D as well. Was that the meeting of the 14th, on the 14th?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I just losing track of time in my own head.
Jill, I was not at the beginning of the tour. I was told that it was not called to order. Is that accurate?
It is, but I'm not sure whether we shouldn't still create some minutes.
Okay, then we can chat after and create a log of what happened. I was at the final
Jill,
two.
can you use, I think Eric put minutes together for the subsequent planning meeting, I think, right, on the 26th. You might be able to use that as a baseline.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, so I'm sorry for the interruption. Can we get a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting on July 14th?
Can I just amend one thing? Sure. Natasha Torrey is technically the interim principal of Royal.
Thank you.
A motion to approve as amended.
As amended, right. We have a motion to approve as amended the minutes for the meeting of July 14th. Jameson moves, second. Jill seconds. All in favor, aye. Callers, aye. 1 and 2. Perfect, thank you. Doesn't appear that there are any members of the public here to make public comment. So we can skip over that. In terms of the chair's report, really nothing to add. I think while Travis is going to talk about next steps in design, maybe what we can do is have, for the benefit of the folks that have not been in the planning meeting, give a quick update on the design process to this point, just kind of high level, and then that'll really cover what's been going on over the past couple weeks. Most of you all attended the school tour or parts of the school tour, so that was really the most material. That and the planning meetings in Dr. Adley's office is what really has been going on over the past couple of weeks. Would like to introduce and welcome Frank Garibaldi to the committee. Frank is going to take the place of Frank Schuster, who had to step down due to his work commitments. Frank, maybe you can give a few minutes on your background. We're really pleased to have you, excited to have you, but maybe give the rest of the committee a few minutes on your background.
Sure. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for having me. So I guess I joined, whether it was earlier this week or late last week, got approved. I know both Jill and Dave Corwer socially. We had gotten to talking a couple of, I guess, weeks ago, and they mentioned there was an opening on the committee, which, to be honest with you, I didn't really even know existed. But we got to talking, and given my background, which after spending 20 years as an investment banker and financing leverage buyouts, I decided to step back from that, and I joined or I'm taking over what is my father's business, which is a commercial HVAC business, which largely works in New York City, in the 5 boroughs. So my background over the past 7 years is a lot more relevant to this committee in terms of, being able to participate on the construction side of things. But in general, so that's sort of the professional background. Both of my children, or our children, go to Hindley. My daughter is going into the 5th grade. Our son is going into the 2nd grade, and mom, Lauren Stevens, is currently the PTO president at Hindley. She just took over. I see Jess Levy is, a member of, whether it's the committee or just in part this planning committee. Lauren just took over from Jess as one of the co-presidents. So we're very involved in Hindley just in general, involved in the community, and moved here 5 years ago, and expect to be here for a very long time. So in terms of just being a part of the long-term planning of Darien, it's something we're both keenly interested in. So that's kind of how I'm here.
That's great. Thank you. And I think that makes you and Jill 2 Hindley representatives on the committee, which is great. So we've got plenty of Hindley representation. Who is caller number 3?
Thank you, Chris.
Hey, hi, it's Dave Kerwar. Sorry, I'm traveling on the
terrific.
way to the airport, but I'm on now, and I'll be on video in about 25 minutes.
No problem. Thanks, Dave. I just wanted to make sure that we knew who all was on the call, and I see Dr. Adley's joined us as well. Hello.
Good evening, everybody.
Hey.
And we'll take a minute to thank Dave for having the temerity to recruit Frank Garibaldi to join us. Thank you, Dave.
Jill, it was a team effort. It was a team effort. We cornered him at a party, and he had no chance to say no.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Then I was going to turn it over to Travis Schnell from KG&D. Bring it for Travis has been along with Jill and Dr. Adley and Jameson and me from time to time attending planning meetings, and Kevin, of course, and then with sometimes the principals and sometimes others. And he can bring us up to date on where things stand on the planning and the design as they move from conceptual to schematic, and then talk about the next steps.
Yep, let's go through that. Yeah, let's go. So I think let's go over the next steps. Some of this is pulled from previous meetings that didn't take place yet, so we'll give you a brief overview, kind of where we're at in the next month. I'd say a lot of work has been occurring, behind the scenes. We've been meeting with the engineers and been doing a lot of coordinating and been setting up a lot of meetings. So the first thing that's going to be happening is a lot of the implementation of the feedback that were received from the walkthroughs and the subsequent meetings. So we're incorporating that into the plans for then follow-up review to make sure we're hitting all those items. And we, of course, are continuing with the architectural development. We're already starting to look at kind of more the little nuts and bolts, even though it's still schematic design. We're starting to look about, what are the wall sections, so we can start incorporating everything. The other thing that's been happening a lot is the mechanical and electrical and plumbing coordination in the background, where we need the spaces for the mechanical units, for the electrical gear, where do we need to add basements at some of these additions to accommodate these. So all that is getting incorporated right now. And then we'll be following up with some additional walkthroughs, which we'll hit on this list shortly. With the building tours, we also had the landscape architect out there from Ty and Bond. So he's taken everything he absorbed, he's taken that back, and we're going to start actually developing some of those learning courtyard layouts. Because right now, everything we've been showing you is kind of just schematic. So we want to see what we can really do with those spaces. So that'll be exciting to see. That'll kind of be the next, hopefully, renderings that we get in front of the committee later this month. Then I know that I don't know if it's happened yet. Maybe Jill and Alan can weigh in, but I know there was an admin. You guys were going to meet with the principals regarding storage requirements, office resource needs. That was scheduled either the 2nd, but maybe it was going to get pushed back to the 9th. So
we did meet with 2 of the principals with me, and Kevin and I met. We talked about resource, SRBI rooms, storage, just what you have here. So we'll continue that meeting on the 9th to finalize it, but we're making good progress there.
okay, got it. Great.
Actually, would you want some of that information as soon as we have it, Travis, or?
I think when you can bundle it kind of all together from the groups, as long as it's, for each school, I'd say.
Okay.
If we have a packet from a school, we would take it as all at once.
Okay.
But I see here, so then the plan, I think, was for us to then follow up with the principals and you guys and meet for another time. That was later in the month, either the 16th or the 23rd. So are we still on track for that?
Yeah, so we can you can certainly do that as early as the 16th.
Okay.
So I think the hope was, Travis, and Alan, just to get the information to you all sometime between the 9th and the 16th so that there's enough time for KG&D to at least review before going into the 16th.
Yes, that would be very helpful indeed. Yep.
That'll work.
Yeah. Okay, great. And touching on that, I know that we listed kind of storage, office, and resource needs. But I think we also probably need to be setting up some user group meetings with specific classroom requirements. And I think that's probably to follow after these meetings. I don't know if there was prior discussions of that, Jill.
No.
Okay, so that would be another item that we would want to get on the list.
Okay.
I think I just saw an email earlier that we are moving ahead with a Green Bank meeting with the engineers. That should be happening Friday morning. I think Green Bank just confirmed that. So they'll be meeting Friday morning and we'll be able to report back at our next update.
Chris or Travis, there was some email traffic on that, but can you give, just to make sure everybody's on the committees on the same page, can you give us a little bit of background of what that is?
Yeah, Green Bank, I think, is running your solar project right now, and we want to either add to it or modify the work that is intended. So we're meeting with Green Bank to see, what we can do going forward and how we can work with them so we coordinate the new work so we're not ripping out newly installed stuff, so we can work around their equipment with the new additions.
And are we doing some of that in consultation with Oxbridge as well?
Meaning?
So Jill,
yeah, Kevin, thank you.
Yeah, I could actually speak to that. I talked to Kip this morning, and him and Rusty and I are going to have a chat tomorrow because they think that there might be some more opportunities, not only at Oxbridge, but also middle school, which is due for a new roof in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years. So we're going to have a chat and then hopefully have an update for the Friday meeting with Travis and the Green Bank folks.
Great. Okay. The other thing that's been happening in the background is we've been sending out RFPs for geotechnical services and underground utility surveys. So those are important. So we do boring samples of the different areas where we're putting new additions, so we can understand the soil, the type of soil we have, the compaction, whether we're hitting rock, where the water levels are. So all that is needed for our engineers to then do the design work. The underground utility surveys, we need to know also within the areas that we're doing work, so we're not hitting any lines. So we have 2 different companies that do that work. One, I think, primarily uses the ground penetrating radar to see all the different lines that aren't already located on the survey, versus the actual going out and digging the holes and doing test pits. That's the geotechnical end. So I should have pricing back, if not the end of this week, early next week, and then I can get that in front of the committee, and we can. I think I sent it out to 3 or 4 companies for each group, the geotech and the underground utility surveys. So we can then evaluate those costs and move forward with that.
Travis, given what you and I and a couple of others went through with the underground lines at the cafeteria, it would be helpful
Yes.
when you bring that to us to talk about anything that's changed in this
Yes.
field. Might keep us from running into that again, if you would, please.
Yes, I think that's especially why we're doing this underground utility survey, which I don't think we did at the cafeteria because we thought we had a good enough survey that told us everything and the pipe was in the wrong spot. So this time we're doing a full underground survey, limited to the areas where we're expecting to be to touch. Civil engineer also suggested we do that at homes where we have the estate that we're looking to acquire.
Oh, good idea.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So following that and kind of, I know we're in the middle of coordinating with Kevin, the IT data power meeting. Kevin, I don't think that quite got set up yet. I think it's probably going to happen after next week, probably the week of the 16th, it sounds like.
Yeah, it sounds like vacation schedules and otherwise. It'll be sooner, hopefully, than later.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be the week of the 16th because Vince, our electrical engineer, is away on vacation next week. So, which brings us into the MEP walkthrough. We were hoping to get that done this week, but Paul wasn't. Paul's away on vacation, I know, and we want him involved in that meeting. So that right now we have scheduled for the 16th. I know Paul, I think, is the only one that has to confirm he can make that date. And we can invite,
I guess if I could just jump in with Frank Garibaldi is
exactly.
joining the committee, does it make sense to see if Frank can join that? And maybe
Yes.
Yeah, I was just about to speak up for myself, so thank you. Yeah, I think it would make sense. I'm clearly behind on this, so looking at plans, which I'm trying to get copies of, will be helpful. But just taking a walkthrough of the MEP stuff would be very useful.
Yeah, because I think at this point, Travis, all we have is existing conditions, right? We don't have anything beyond that for MEP, right?
That's right, because usually in the schematic design phase, MEP doesn't really put together that much in the way of drawings. But what we do have is an initial narrative that outlines the three different buildings that we can send over to you, Frank. I think they put that together the other month. And the goal of this walkthrough is really to take their narrative. They've been doing some sketches and understanding where they want to locate things. And just so we kind of walk through a typical classroom, typical hallway, and typical spaces on the work that we're intending to do there and that it's meeting your expectations, where we're removing unit ventilators, where we're taking down ceilings to put up the ductwork, what are we doing in the gymnasiums, just so everyone's on the same page.
Oh, well, the 16th of August, I assume, is when you said the 16th, or was that September you were trying to do?
No, it was the 16th. Yep.
Of August.
Yep. Of August.
Yeah, I think that should be fun. That's a month. What day is it? I don't have my calendar, but I should be able to.
Tuesday. Yeah, it's a week from next Tuesday.
Yeah.
When we hang up, Travis, will you just loop Frank in on that email trail with all the engineers and Paul? Thank you.
I'll loop him in and I'll remind Paul to respond. I'm sure he's trying to avoid emails all the way. So yeah, and then we'll shoot for the morning. I think that's easier for everyone. Also before the heat. Let's see what's next. And I think we do have representatives from ONG, David. I don't know if it's going to be you, but I think maybe George, confirmed that he was available, so he'll be participating.
I believe George, and I think we're also going to have one of our MEP coordinators there as well. I didn't think George Parento, who had done some initial analysis, I don't think he's available that day, but Jim Hendrickson, who's at the Oxbridge site now, I think he's going to be available. So.
Okay, great. Perfect. All right, so then I have in there the next follow-up meeting with the principals and KG&D, so that's the 16th and the 23rd. So we'll juggle that with the walkthrough. Could probably split that between Eric and I or something. We're also, actually what we've been doing lately is putting together preliminary phasing plans that we're going to review with ONG and help establish the pre-con schedule. So we are getting kind of a schematic package together that we then intend to share with you guys later in the month, and all this ahead of getting all the SD documents together for later in September. So we want to go through kind of preliminary, and it's the phasing plans will nicely walk us through the project. They'll be colored so we can see the different existing conditions during construction and then the final construction. Yep, and then the design committee will review the schematic design where we're at later in the month. And I know there's some follow-up state review meetings that I think, David, you guys were following up on to see status, but we're not expecting to really hear anything back until September.
That's correct. Yeah, at this point, they're really far behind, and we won't hear anything for a little while. But we're in the queue.
Okay, great. And other than that, I think we still need to hear back from our civil engineer regarding the curb cuts and working with the state to kind of solidify that schedule.
Right.
So there's no surprises there. Yeah.
Is there anything you need from us to keep that moving for your number 13?
Not that I've heard yet, but I will follow up with Joe Canis at Ty and Bond and check in with him on that.
And I think the one thing you don't, go ahead. I'm sorry, was someone else going to say something? I think one of the items you don't have on there is the Curtis property at Holmes, and I guess we're waiting on we're waiting on the updated Redness and Mead land survey, correct, showing wetlands?
That's right. I spoke to Redness and Mead after our site visit, and they know that they've added that to their purview, and I'm just looking for an update from them.
Yeah, I mean, they generated the base survey, right? So it's really a matter of going out and adding that to that survey before we can, because I then think the next step is connecting with planning and zoning and environmental protection in town to make sure that they're on board with what we're planning to do there.
What was needed to be added to the survey?
Identifying any wetlands.
Oh, the wetlands. Okay, got it. And then then you guys are going to make a decision whether to pursue purchase of the property.
Well, it's not a purchase. It's really a transfer of control from
got
the
it.
town to the school district. But yeah, I mean, once we determine location and extent of wetlands, then then we look at it and say, well, if the idea is to use the easterly piece of that, right, the part closest to the parking lot as additional parking, can we do that based on the location and the extent of the wetlands? If the answer is yes, we think we can, from a design standpoint, then we go and talk to the applicable folks in town to make sure they're on board with it.
Understood. Yeah.
So,
were there any other questions as to the
any questions
steps?
or thoughts or reactions to what Travis just went over?
No.
Great.
Thank you, Travis.
Okay. Yep, you're welcome. I know, no pretty pictures this time. I got stuck with just more of a mundane schedule, but it's okay.
And then I think the next thing you were going to talk about, Travis, is sustainability and how that relates to design.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. And I think one of the first questions I had, I know we had previously discussed whether you guys were going to engage with your sustainable design consultant from Ox Ridge. And I don't know if this conversation is then going to lead to that or if that decision has been made or discussed.
I don't believe we have to this point.
Okay.
I think this is to educate the committee on sort of what sustainable design is, how different committees would go through that process of kind of what the parameters might be that would involve decision making. So, when we talk about sustainable design, that is one of our goals. But what would be the different ways that we'd go about meeting it?
Right.
Just one thing with that on Ox Ridge, I don't think they actually used a sustainable design consultant. I mean, the design team there, I believe, had some of their in-house people, but by statute, the Connecticut school projects have to meet Connecticut high performance building standards, which is essentially the equivalent of LEED silver, but the project is not obtaining or seeking any specific, they're not actually seeking a LEED plaque or or well building or anything like that. So just so you know what's happening over there.
Okay. And that's a good point, because that's kind of where we're at here. That's kind of what we discussed, that the codes today, whether it's the Connecticut codes, right, or the international building codes, they've caught up to the LEED standards for the most part. So we have to follow those code minimums, and that's our standard kind of care of design practice as is. And we can go over certain examples in the next 2 slides on kind of what we expect to achieve in these current projects. And that's different. So that's kind of what I'm showing here as best practice versus an actual certification, which actual certification probably would involve a consultant. You know, it does require, there are considerable fees associated with that just to go through the paperwork to get that certification. And it's just a more rigorous process. So it kind of guarantees that you're going to get all those items that you specify. It's going to go through all the checklists and make sure each one is hit upon. Where when we're doing more of the best practice, you know, we're going to specify things, but they might not end up in the project because, you know, the low bidder is going to choose differently, but it's still going to be within code. It just might not be what we specifically, you know, specified. So I think it's just a matter of being conscious to, you know, what we do want to specify and the standards that we want to achieve. And I think all our conversations leading up to now, it's been not to go for that certification, not to spend that extra money, knowing that, you know, we are generally doing good things here at these projects, you know, just based on standard care and best practice. I think the 2 kind of leading standards, certification standards, are kind of the LEED and the WELL building standards is kind of the newer one. LEED's been around for a longer time. I'd say LEED, which stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, that focuses primarily on sustainability, efficiency, and environmental impact, and more building specific. And it has your different certified silver, gold, and platinum certification levels. What David was mentioning, that kind of the Connecticut code is kind of a silver equivalent. And that's kind of focusing on energy usage, water management, construction materials, indoor air quality, and waste control. And WELL building standard, which I don't know a whole lot about, to be honest with you, but I know that it focuses primarily on the impact the building has on the individual and the health and comfort of individuals within the space. And it too has several levels: silver, gold, and platinum. And I think it focuses on 7 areas: air, water, nourishment, light, fitness, comfort, and mind. Beyond that, I would have to do more research, though, on what each one of those parameters, and that would be the decision we'd make. You know, if we wanted to pursue one of these, then we would go into more detail on what those certifications require. But it's both a time and a cost commitment that everyone needs to be on board with, for sure, which is probably why it wasn't pursued, David, I'm guessing, at Ox Ridge, and knowing that, you know, you were achieving a silver level standard of care.
Exactly. I think that was the decision, was you're still getting a building that is really, you know, meeting standards that are, you know, meet and exceed, and it's just not spending the money on a plaque, putting that money into the building.
Right. And then I just missed the one. There is a Connecticut Green Leaf School program. I don't know if you guys have looked at that before. I don't know if Ox Ridge, that's different than like a construction program that looks like it's green practices kind of in the everyday operation of the school. So I don't know if that was something that the committee or that the district has looked into previously, or is a program they're involved with. But I did note that that's another program.
Alan, are you familiar with any of these 3 from anywhere else, or Kevin from other schools you've worked with? And
I'm familiar with the Greenleaf program. It's more practices in terms of what we're doing in the schools and the kids getting involved in it. So it's more of a student orientated activity.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Same.
Okay, so I think it'd be helpful to go over kind of some typical categories of sustainable design practice and how we expect these projects to incorporate them, or to show whether we're not incorporating. And there's some that require decisions by the group on what we're going to go after. So neighborhood schools, that's usually a criteria they like to see, that they're community focused and that they're kind of within walking distance for the kids. So you have less vehicle traffic and you're using less gas. I think that's probably predominantly Henley where you get the most foot traffic. So that would be a plus in that camp. Again, this is not something that we can improve on with the new work, but this is just something that your existing conditions already take into consideration. And if you have any questions, just stop me as we're going through the list here. I'd say the biggest thing that you're doing, the biggest positive impact that you're having is that we're reusing the old buildings. That's keeping all that material out of the landfill and reusing buildings is the biggest thing you can do from a sustainability point of view. The preservation of existing woodlands, I know at Royal, we're choosing specifically not to develop in areas where we have a lot of trees. So I think the good news here is that a lot of our development is very kind of tight to the existing building. We're not really sprawling out onto the site. We are keeping a lot of open area and maintaining a lot of existing vegetation. So it's another area where you usually get points for. It's kind of a funny one, but I think you could always get a point for having bike racks just to promote, the biking and less car use at the facilities. That's always an easy one to add in. You may even have now green vehicle parking. That's something that we haven't discussed. If we want to be adding charging stations at each one of these campuses, I don't think you have any currently. I don't know if the conversation has come up or if there's plans to do so at any of the campuses in the district.
I don't think it was part of the ed specs, right, Joe?
No, I don't recall it being, but.
And I'll add to that just as a note that having installed many and dealt with all of that, it's very expensive. So
yep.
It's very time consuming and very expensive with very little return really. So.
Right.
And I can't imagine that many people are commuting so far that their electric cars nowadays need a charge during the day. It's, most of the teachers are local enough and it's not public parking, so.
Yeah, and Jameson, I think you're probably at least $10,000 for a station when you get it installed, if not more.
Yeah, so is level 1, which is plug into your house and regular 110 outlet. Level 2 is the next
level 2
step up. Yeah. And then level 3 is the high-speed chargers. The problem is, level 2, the chargers are fairly inexpensive nowadays. They're not too bad, maybe a couple $1,000s, but now you're talking about routing over the wiring.
Exactly.
And if electricity and panels aren't up to spec for that, now you're talking about bringing in more electricity. And
yep.
We have a tough enough time getting it done here through Eversource, let alone for all the schools and everything, and all the parts are on major back order, and so it's a bit of a nightmare. And the other thing is the cars for the level 2 chargers, for the cars to actually see any sort of gain in charge, they've got to sit there for 5-6 hours, and it's very unlikely that most of the people would be doing that. So
right. So why don't we? I think let's skip that.
Yep.
Skip that one for now.
Yep, that's an easy one. But to Jameson's point, the reason to bring it up now is if we are installing new electrical services, so now would be the time at these 3 buildings if you wanted to consider them. Just keep that in mind. But you're right, if most of your teachers are really not commuting from long distances and you don't have that need, why spend the money?
Travis, does elongating the bus loops while we're on parking give us any credit in that maybe we get more efficient use out of our buses? I'm reaching potentially. But
I think you're reaching on that one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Increasing the bus loops, really, we're just reducing the pervious surface, which doesn't help things, but
okay.
Yeah, I don't think that changes too much. That's better from a point of view of the local traffic flow conditions, because you're going to still have the same kind of number of queuing buses exhausting the same amount of fumes. So,
okay.
Another one is the kind of construction activity and their kind of pollution prevention, and these are kind of standard kind of practice where they need to be providing erosion control on the site. So usually that gets walled off and protected, so you're not getting dirt or water flowing into non-work area pieces of the property. And they always have to have kind of tracking pad equipment, so they're not, pulling mud elsewhere onto the site. And they usually have to keep, if it's a dry conditions, they usually have to keep it watered down, so you're not getting dust conditions. So that's all that's in our kind of standard specifications.
And just Travis, if I could just chime in there too. Some
Yeah,
of
go ahead.
those really the construction driven activities, I'll just say it once so I don't have to interrupt you again. But when it comes to site stuff, and then when we get into further into the different categories, when we get into the indoor air quality, things like that, we do have baseline specifications that we include on all of our projects now that have to do with complying with these, because whether it's a LEED or a Connecticut high performance project, they really all have similar requirements. So those are things that whether you do one of these programs or not, we have some of those baseline things as far as controlling things on site for, like, duct inlet protection, making sure that, duct is all covered when it comes out and remains covered until, so it's not exposed to dust and things like that. So we have that regardless.
Yep, good points. So the next one, protect, restore, create habitats, and to promote biodiversity. So, we are adding a lot of vegetation potentially in these learning commons, and I think that's a huge potential there. Not only to take those gardens, but we can be selective in kind of the types of plants that we use. Make sure that they're native species. Make sure that they're low maintenance, low water usage, and on top of that, you can consider a wider maybe range of native plants, and maybe you want to incorporate that into how they then become learning environments. Are we creating pollinator gardens? Are we creating like bird gardens or vegetable gardens? And there's a lot of options there. But I think the key point is, that you're planting native species that are kind of low impact and low water usage is key there. And again, we're not really disturbing too much of the existing habitat, which is another important benefit of doing kind of relatively minor compact additions.
I think that's one our community will value for sure. That whole category. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's going to get more fun to talk about as the landscape architect dives into and we start really talking about these learning commons and how we want to landscape them.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of goes right into the maintaining the open space again with the compactness of the additions and we want to maintain the play areas anyway. The intent here is not to have a sprawling building, so that's why everything is tight to the structure. Rainwater management. So here we do have the Hinley, we do have that rain garden where we are collecting some of the stormwater detention. So that's helpful. I think the rest of the sites, we're not really focusing too much on detention because it's not necessary. But otherwise, we are managing stormwater per current standards. One thing we can consider, though, is the collection of rainwater for irrigation. So that is something we can do, that we can talk to the civil engineer for kind of some guidance on that and his recommendations. But that's essentially, taking what you're collecting off the roofs in your gutters and your downspouts and holding them in cisterns that you can then use on the property for irrigation purposes. I don't know what Kevin thinks of that. That has pros and cons to it. You have these now tanks of water that you kind of have to just be mindful of and maintain and not let sit too long for them to kind of start growing bacteria in. But it's definitely a feature that we can look at. I don't know if anyone's thought of that or that's come up in any conversations.
Is that something that can be thought of at the same time as we're planning and thinking about the outdoor learning spaces? So it can be used at least partially for that purpose?
Yeah, I think maybe there's opportunities within there that we can collect them, and maybe they become features that you can, that can help as educational tools for the kids as well.
I know at Oxford we had a big underground, or will have an underground retention tank, which is a requirement of P&Z for as per zoning. When you add a certain amount of a new impervious area. So
Yes.
I don't know if David, if you're on, if we're doing any pumping or anything there. I don't recall there being any kind of tap in for irrigation, but that's just something to keep in mind on these projects if we end up having to put underground storage. I'm not sure if anyone's ever seen that done as a use for irrigation.
Yeah, I know we're not using those actually for irrigation. It's really, like you said, Randy, it's just to mitigate the amount of impervious surface that we're going to have there at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think I've seen it come up or asked before on, why don't you use those underground cisterns as irrigation? I'm sure there's some complexities there and pumps that are then required, but we can discuss more with Ty and Bond, our civil engineer. And I think they're doing their investigations now on if we need additional retention on the other sites in addition to the rain garden at Henley. The other item here is heat island reduction. And usually that's achieved either with white roofs or the vegetative green roofs. And I think we're still up in the air where and if we're doing green roofs. I think we've seen some renderings at Hindley where the low roofs had green roofs on there. They also help with water retention and kind of slow the storm water runoff and help to alleviate that flow because they retain the water, albeit they retain the water on the roof, which some people don't like. The goal is to get water off the roof. I can see a slight smile coming from Kevin there. But it is nice to kind of have them on the lower roofs, especially when you have a second floor that overlooks that roof, because it just makes a nicer view out. So it's doing two things. It's helping with heat island reduction, and it's also just giving you a nicer view out. So that's something we can look at and we can consider and price as it's an easy one to kind of price as an alternate. We would just want to make sure that the structural engineer kind of incorporates that into his design, because it does add some significant weight onto the roofs that they just need to accommodate.
So that's one where it would be nice to hear from Kevin and Alan, doesn't have to be tonight, about how they feel about the one over the cafeteria, since we do have one in operation, if you will. And we did, as Travis said, we did bid it out as an alternate and it ended up fitting.
Yeah.
But if we'd even want to keep it as an alternate at another point, would love to hear from Alan and Kevin.
I could definitely give you my 2 cents on it.
I think the one at the cafeteria was nice because that was an outdoor terrace up above, so you were looking immediately down onto that
right.
roof. So it was nice.
It doesn't get a tremendous lot of use, but it's better looking, definitely, aesthetically.
Right, and they're not intended to get use. Like you wouldn't be inhabiting these rooftops. They're just more aesthetic and to help with water control and heat. Yep. Site lighting designed for dark skies. So designing for dark skies meaning you're having kind of a cutoff for your fixture, so it's not flooding the sky with light. All the light is focused down onto what you need to illuminate, and that's a standard spec for us. A lot of times towns will also require kind of what they call house side cutoff shields, so you don't spread light onto neighboring properties. So we will do that when we're close to property lines, and otherwise all the lights will be focused kind of downwards, so we're minimizing light pollution. Joint use of facilities. I think this is kind of currently the working plan, that all these buildings are considered kind of community use facilities, especially with the fields and the playgrounds and potentially the gyms and the common spaces. So I think that's one we can make an argument that we're achieving. And then we touched on this before, the outdoor water use, just kind of limiting your irrigation use, keeping the native species and drought tolerant plants. Any questions on kind of some of these site features? And then moving on to the indoor kind of building items, indoor water use. A standard will be low flow restroom fixtures that we can decide whether we do track consumption or not. But this, now to be clear, this would be at new toilet rooms that we're renovating and not throughout. So you'll be left with whatever you have existing, and in the new toilet rooms, we can pick low flow fixtures. We can pick dual flush fixtures, as long as, assuming Kevin has no objections to that. And we can, we can populate with signage, letting kids know that why this is here, that it's here, how to use it, and the benefits of it on doing the dual flush. We can also get into how you metered faucets. Do you want to have sensors on the faucets rather than just an on-off? You might have some of that now. I don't recall, Kevin. And lately,
I'm sorry. I was going to say all of our meter now is non-battery. It's just manual meters.
Just manual, the push down.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're doing like the electric eye meters, and a lot what we've been doing lately is kind of the 3-in-1 sink. So you've got everything right at the sink. You've got your soap, you got your water, and then you have your hand drying all at the sink. And so you're also reducing the use of paper towels. And it's nice too, because then kids everything's happening at the sink, and you're not walking over wet hands, and then you're at the other hand dryer, and then you're getting water all over the ground. So that's something we would consider and recommend. Unless there's that you found that hand dryers don't work for the district, and you do prefer the paper towels. And sometimes we kind of include both. We have the hand dryers there, but if someone needs paper towels, there's room for paper towels. Solar thermal on the roof. So that we're not planning for, because the solar thermal is more just hot water, and all our focus is kind of just on the solar photovoltaic, because then you can use the electricity for a lot more things using the same real estate. You can use it to heat your water and all the other functions rather than just a dedicated solar thermal hot water system. And we've touched on the PV. We know where you've already got the PV program going, and we're looking to expand that as we could, and we'll go into more detail after the Green Bank meeting. So we are replacement and using highly efficient mechanical systems. So that's happening. I do have some numbers. I think if I can call up quickly. I think we're reducing generally like 20% the usage of fossil fuels from the buildings where we're switching to high efficiency condensing boilers. And we're increasing the efficiency by about 50% with the new energy recovery air handlers instead of keeping the existing steam and exhaust system. And then we're having a lot of new motors across the board. So those are all higher efficiency. And that's all due to the stricter energy codes without even getting into the certification programs. So again, the reduction of the fossil fuels, just to be clear, that is on-site, your on-site use, where your utility gets the power from. They may be still getting it obviously from fossil fuels, but hopefully they're slowly diversifying that into the more sustainable resources there. Again, we touched on this before, the regional sourcing of materials. This is kind of how we specify products. So you'll get credits for keeping items specified to within usually like a 500 mile radius of the project site where it's produced and delivered. So that reduces just the emissions from transporting that material. So we can take extra effort in specifying that, but again, we're not specifically tracking it rigorously. We would just make an effort to specify those items. And again, when you're kind of public bidding it, you're always subject to the contractor coming back, hey, I found this cheaper price, but it's coming from 1,000 miles away, and that's when you have to start weighing which way to go on that. So in our case, where we're kind of just doing a good standard of care, that's something we can roll with the punches as we get them from dealing with the individual contractors, versus as if you were going for an actual certification, it would count against you in that process. Building product selection, usually the materials that we're picking are for long life and have good life cycle costs, the balance there is the overall cost of the material. Sure, we'd love to put terrazzo in all the corridors, but it just has a higher upfront cost that is hard to weigh against using a VCT material. But generally speaking, since we're working with schools all the time, we are specifying goods that last a significant amount of time. And we can, when we select furniture, we can definitely get into furniture that aligns with the human health and performance in that regard. That everything is kind of ergonomically designed and specific to the users of the facility. And we've talked a lot about flexibility over the course of the design, so that's our intent. That's kind of the overarching goal, is to keep everything flexible for future use spaces. So they give credits for just maintaining flexibility in spaces. Indoor air quality is a good one to talk about. Our standard is a MERV 8 level filter. I don't know if since COVID, you've probably somewhat familiar with the MERV 8 versus MERV 13 filters. I'm sure Kevin is. MERV 13 is the higher density filter that does protect against and does filter out viruses like COVID. However, there are some costs to that. And right now we would need some direction on which way we're gonna go. We're gonna design to the MERV 8, but we can consider the MERV 13. The downside to the MERV 13 is usually it requires higher output of your fan performance, which usually equates to, well, more energy, but more noise within the space. And they also tend to clog up quicker because they're capturing, a higher level of particulates. So they'll have to be replaced more often. So some of the remedies here, we have done, we have installed air handlers where we use both. We use MERV 8 and 13 in sequence, where the MERV 8 would do the heavy lifting and capture a lot of the particles up front, and that's the one you would replace more often. And then the MERV 13 would be subsequent in the run to kind of capture the smaller particulates and the COVID-related items. So there's a cost associated with that and performance associated with that we would just need to be clear on. And I don't know if it's a specific requirement to be honest, I don't recall if that was in the ed specs or not, but I don't know if that's a specific requirement of the committee or the community on how you want to handle air filtration.
I think when you go through the MEP walkthrough, let's talk about what the district standard is, compare it against whatever the current experts are recommending, and then bring all that information in front of the committee, please.
Okay. And Kevin, have you been using MERV 13s anywhere?
Yeah, we have MERV 13 at the high school, for example, but not at the elementaries. But using the 8s and the 13s in tandem would be, my recommendation.
Yeah. What's hard is at the existing facilities, you can't just necessarily throw in 13 because your existing motors can't operate the fans at the speeds required to get the right airflow through the MERV 13. So that's why you want to think about it when you're doing new HVAC units. Acoustic performance in classrooms. So that should improve. We're going to, I think the last decision in the last meeting was to replace the ceilings within the classroom spaces. So those will get a high NRC, which is a noise reduction coefficient level. And so that'll control the acoustic performances within the classrooms, which is critical. And indoor lighting, we definitely are utilizing daylighting. We'll look into using light shelves. I think you have some examples of that at Ox Ridge that takes the light high, bounces it off, reflects it up into the ceiling, and it's a white ceiling. So that helps to illuminate deeper into the space. And we're replacing many of the fixtures with the high quality LED lighting, which saves a ton on energy, which is, again, just the standard. That's what we're doing everywhere these days. So that's a quick rundown of all the potential kind of sustainable options that we're, for the most part, focusing on. I think for the most part, there's a good story to be told here that we are considering a lot of these items.
Yeah,
And
no,
it's
that's
just-
great. Thank you, Travis. I guess a lot of these we just need to talk about them as options as the design process goes along,
Yep.
right? And make decisions about whether they're practical, constructible,
Yes.
affordable as we go.
Yeah, I think the biggest decision to know early on is whether or not we're pursuing any certification, official certification, because that just requires more upfront prep.
I
associated with
believe we had decided not to at a planning meeting a few meetings back, but
Okay.
we can confirm that.
Well,
Jill, you were gonna go
I
ahead.
think that, yeah, I think based on what we were hearing, the design committee wasn't recommending that we needed to pursue it, but didn't want to make that decision on behalf of the building committee. Wanted the building committee to have the same information so that we could decide as a whole if we want to pursue it. So whether we want to, have that discussion today, or whether people want to ruminate on this a little bit, and we can decide at our next meeting, either way. But it sounds like we're meeting the silver level lead. And from what I'm hearing you say, Travis, the additional, basically what we're getting from a lead certification in particular would be somewhat more challenging on the certification, and that potentially some constraints as we're making, for example, sourcing decisions. It doesn't sound like there is anything that we would be achieving from either from a function or or any other advantage.
Yeah, generally speaking, yes. There's a publicity factor in it too, getting the seal and the certification that you can then show to the community that you were rigorous in that process. But again, as what David's saying, especially with the Connecticut high performance standards, that's baseline these days. If you wanted to go above and beyond, if you wanted to get into a net zero building, or a passive house level building where you're talking about huge levels of insulation and really efficient mechanical systems, you're talking about a lot of money and a lot of certification steps, but which is not, where we want to go with these buildings. That's not the
Well,
primary
plus it
focus
would
here.
seem, yeah, I mean, this is not for nothing, but it would seem a little bit odd to pursue it for renovations when we're not pursuing it as part of Ox Ridge.
Exactly.
Just
Yeah.
just strikes me as a little bit inconsistent, but
Yep.
and especially, if we're going to meet the state standard, which is functionally a LEED silver, as Jill was saying, the incremental benefit of getting the plaque, and when compared with the cost of having to do that and having to bring in, yet another consultant, should be factored in.
Is there anyone on the call that has additional questions they want answered? Do you guys want to make a decision tonight? Do you want to punt it you want to think on it a little bit and ask around and come back to this topic?
What are we thinking on, like proceeding with achieving a certain status, or?
Yes, whether we would look for a higher level of LEED certification or any other certification. 1, and 2 would be whether we want to ultimately hire someone to help us achieve that.
Gotcha. I'm good to make a decision on it tonight, but that's me.
Jill, if the committee feels that we need to do this, we should probably maybe make a decision later if there are costs involved.
Well, I think the only decision we would make, I think the only decision we can make today would be a decision to pursue it, seek proposals, et cetera. I don't think we could make a definitive decision to get it. We have to study what it entails and get more detail, right? I mean,
yes.
Just to kind of some rules of thumb for what I think is out there for knowledge is that when you look at, how much does it cost to actually acquire one of these official certifications, between consultants and everything else, you could be looking at, upwards of 5 to even 10% of the cost of the project. So when you think of that, it's, like I said, like we said earlier, it's not small money. So,
well, right, and we have to weigh that against what are the actual as versus the perceived benefits, right? When we have to build to state standards anyway.
Right.
you're
What
getting,
are we getting for that additional, let's call it $50,000 to $70,000?
That's why I think it's worth it if you were going like to the top levels and really doing those net zero building, then you're already going down that path, then it might be more worthwhile because that's a primary goal of that project. But for something at this level where we're already achieving a very, good baseline, that's what our goals are. And the money can be better used with the added program use.
Just one other question, would it only be for the additions and renovations that we're doing? Because presumably the existing school buildings that are not being touched are what they are, right? They're not.
Correct.
They're not.
There's a different certification for an existing building where you have additions, I believe. I just have to go into the details of what that is, but you can still get awarded. I think there's different parameters because they take into account the existing facilities. But it's definitely easier to do with a new building.
The other piece that I would add to the total conversation is that part of why we hired Travis, Eric, and KG&D is because that we knew that they would bring a focus on sustainability because that's built into their practice.
Right.
So I think maybe the other way to ask the question is there anyone on the committee who would like to pursue further certification, or are we satisfied with the work as outlined today?
I think we're satisfied.
Yeah.
Unless anyone else says anything.
I'm satisfied.
Satisfied. Same
Do we
here.
need? Okay. Thank you. Do we need to make a vote on this?
I don't think we have to.
I don't think so. No.
No.
Okay.
I think we probably would vote if the alternative, if we did want to pursue it and get proposals, et cetera.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else from anybody for either Travis or Dave Cravenzola? Because we're at the point in the meeting, and I want to be respectful of people's time. At the point in the meeting, we were going to move to adjourn to executive session. I wanted to do that at the end of the meeting, so Dave and Travis didn't have to sit around
Much
entertaining
appreciated.
themselves. So anything else for either of those two guys before we move to go into executive session?
Thank you, Travis and Dave.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
guys.
Travis, do you do me a favor? I don't know if I have it somewhere, but would you mind email me your cell phone?
Yes, of course.
Just I can just touch base with you on a couple of things. Thanks.
Yep. Could you also, Travis, if you haven't, these slides on sustainability and on next steps were super helpful. Would it be possible to just email those to the
Of course.
to the committee mailing list?
Yep. No problem.
That would be great.
I'll do that now.
Travis, I sent you an email just before you send it out there. There's one or two things just to correct there.
Oh, got it. Will do.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, great.
With that, can
Thanks,
I get
everyone.
a motion? Thank you, guys.
Okay.
With that, can I get a David? Thank you. With that, can I get a motion to go into executive session? Jameson moves. Jill seconds. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are now in executive session. The recording, I assume what that means, Sarah, is the recording's turned off.
Yep. Give me 1 second and I will take care of that.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, well then I think that wraps up everything we need to discuss this evening, unless anybody on the call has anything for the good of the order that they want to bring up.
Well, I think we need to talk about next dates. And for August, we can have room 206 ostensibly available on the 24th of August. If you would like to pursue having a meeting in person, or if you want to have another virtual, that's fine. We do not have another August meeting scheduled. And right now there are no available nights in room 206
I
for
would
September,
suggest we
but
go
can use the
virtual. I know I'm
auditorium.
on vacation. I'm on vacation that week myself, so I would not be in person in any case.
Okay. Do you want to go virtual?
So why don't we circle the 24th for a virtual, and if we have to cancel it, we can cancel it.
Okay.
Depending on what happens between now and then, there may be some, we may be, knock on wood, you know, be able to vote on an architect's contract and the CM contracts, and we may have some reports on the MEP walkthrough at that point. So it may make sense to do a meeting on the 24th.
Yes,
Okay.
and admin and KG&D will have met with the principals too by then. So
Okay. And then I'll put out some dates for September in an email to the group. We'll figure that out.
Okay. With that, can I get a motion to adjourn? David moves, Jameson seconds. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. I'm sorry we ran so late, but I think this was a helpful and productive meeting.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Good night.